360 to $440 billion just in the year 2029-2030 alone to India's GDP. Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the recently concluded Startups Mahakumbh said that India had the potential to lead the world's AI capabilities and how in the future AI would be used to address societal needs in the areas of agriculture, healthcare, education, transportation, infrastructure, all by way of use of dynamic data. Here comes this next session that has on its panel academia, industry experts and startup heads. May I please invite on stage the esteemed panelists of this session. Please put your hands together and welcome on the dais Irina Ghosh, Managing Director, Microsoft India. Good morning and a very, very, very warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us here at Business Standard. Manthan, please. Amit Sanghi, Research Head, IBM, India. Good morning and a very warm welcome to you too. Ravi Jain, Head Strategy, Krutrim. Good morning and a very warm welcome to you too. Ankur Puri, Partner, McKinsey. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for all our panelists. Thank you. And please welcome on stage Professor Balaraman Ravindran, Head Vadvani School of AI in IIT Madras, Head Robert Bosch Center of Research and close advisor to government on AI. Very warm welcome to you. And to steer the proceedings in this session, Suveen Sinha, Chief Content Editor, Business Standard, will join us on stage.
Hi. Hi. Thank you, Gitika. Hello and welcome. Okay. All right. So thanks to all the panelists for agreeing to join this session and welcome once again to the audience. Just to say that late last night, actually, I was writing an email to all the panelists to recap the discussions we have been having over the last couple of days. And I realized that I had used the word discuss or discussion at least 5 times in the first 2 sentences. It's probably because how much I was looking forward to this session. And who wouldn't? Artificial intelligence is as pressing a subject as it is divisive. It promises enormous gains in productivity, and Gitika reeled off some numbers which were large, but it also promises to cause enormous disruption. Now, disruption led by technology is something that human civilization has seen many a time before. But the speed at which AI promises to cause this disruption has not been seen before. It will involve inevitably a large-scale displacement. Therefore, the way we harness AI has to be done with a humane face. We have to talk about redeployment and reskilling, etc., etc. In fact, I was listening to Mr. Nainan, who was on the stage just before. He was delivering a lecture. And he said that in just 10 years, the amount of computation power used to train AI models has increased by 10 billion times. Now, you know, how much faster is that? At least my mind is not able to process that. And McKinsey Global Institute says that 15% of the global workforce will be displaced in the next 6 years. So the government, societies, and all of us need to come together to see how best we can harness the change that is coming upon us. To begin with, let me invite Irina Ghosh, Managing Director, Microsoft India. I think she has earned the right to be the first speaker because Microsoft, I think, surprisingly for a large enterprise, has proved to be very nimble when it comes to AI. There is Copilot, which you mentioned in one of our chats yesterday. And of course, we all know where OpenAI gets its money from. So, Irina, innovation versus a possible downside, how do we balance the two?
Thank you, Suvin. Hello. Yeah, thank you, Suvin. Absolutely a pleasure and a complete honor to be here with all of you today. What a place to discuss at a juncture when we are celebrating the Business Standard Manthan and talking about AI and generative AI, which is really propelling the nation, the growth, and the opportunities that we have in the future. And it's a very insightful question that you kind of asked, that how do we kind of balance out the possibilities and still taking into consideration things which can possibly which possibly need to be thought through in the way we are thinking about development. So first, talking a little bit about the economic growth opportunities. We have really heard about the fact that the power of AI can contribute to about a 400 to 500 billion by 2025 to India's GDP. Now, what does this mean for all of us living here? Does it really provide the promise as we see in the accelerated manner? I think the answer to that is yes, because there was a study that we did along with IDC, and some of the findings from there is something that I'd like to share. The first thing is that about 70% of all organizations are in various advanced stages of adopting and infusing AI. The second thing, people are always worried about this ROI. So what goes into that is two vectors, time and the return, right? It's taking anywhere less than 12 months to do a full-fledged deployment. And by about 14 months, people are able to see a ROI. And for $1 spent, you're getting about a 3.5x of an investment return. Having said that, we really need to be mindful, do we have the right skill sets to ensure that this is happening in a very pervasive, sustained manner? What are we doing towards creating the skill sets? You talked about the impact to the workforce which can happen. The way we think about it is a person who is kind of thinking about his relevance, her relevance in the future shall stay so by the power of AI versus a person who might not be. And so goes for what an organization would be doing as well. And we are seeing really groundbreaking impacts which is happening right from education to healthcare, retail, various realms put together. I think the part that we are very mindful of is that when we are thinking of all these things put together, how are we thinking in an inclusive way towards ensuring there is protection of privacy? How are we compliant? How is everything done in a secure, responsible, and what we call AI for good manner? So that's the summary.
Thank you, Reena. Moving on to Amit, who's next here. Amit, you have been with IBM for more than 16 years, and you say that that's pretty much the average in the company. Interestingly, you also made the point that when it comes to cutting-edge development in AI, it has moved out of the four walls of large enterprises. It's happening in a more open space. Now, someone working with a large enterprise and seeing all this development happen in an open space, and you work with a whole lot of, with different sections of people involved in this. How do you look at it from a consumer perspective? And I would say IBM is one of your clients, right? Because you...
Yeah,
Yeah.
we are IBM, and IBM is one of our clients, right? And
Yes.
Yeah, so maybe a couple of things there. One is definitely, if you look 20, 30 years ago, a lot of technology innovation would happen, like you said, within the four walls of an industry lab or an R&D center or some academia. But in the last 10 to 15 years, AI for sure, but even things like cloud computing and everything that's happening, so much of it happens in the open, in communities, and there's sort of daily testing that happens and proving and disproving and all of that, right? And what we see is, from a producer's perspective, somebody who's trying to develop technology, the only way to do it now in a way that is meaningful is to engage and be part of that process, right? Even for a research lab like the one we have, we are directly engaged, and we have contributors, maintainers who are part of these open source projects and are shaping these and engaging with scientists and developers from many other organizations such as Microsoft and others, right? So for the producer of technology, that is really where the innovation and proving ground is happening. For a consumer, in a sense, it's becoming a little more confusing, because earlier it would be you trust a vendor, you go to the vendor, you buy what they give you. But now every day there's something new that comes out in open source on Hugging Face and this and that. And so for consumers, it's becoming important to also develop technology expertise in-house to be able to make those decisions, right? Of course, it also becomes very important to have vendor partners who can help you understand that landscape and make the right choices, especially in the case of AI. Since IBM works a lot with enterprises, large banks and so on, and also our own enterprise, There's so much excitement, and as Irina mentioned, there's like pilots, POCs happening across the industries. There's this tremendous excitement. There's also tremendous, I would say, caution around we hope we don't get something wrong, right? In terms of whether it's privacy, whether it's compliance requirements, ability to go back and see what data went into my pipeline. 3 years later, I don't want to have an issue where I really don't know what went into my AI training pipeline, and then I'm hunting for that, right? So there's a serious need that the industry is seeing for tools and methods that allow them to control and govern the entire process, to bring that trust, to bring that governance and responsibility, not just in the AI system, but in the entire process of creating the AI and of maintaining the life cycle of the AI, right? I think this is the one innovation space where I see scientists, developers, legal teams, lawyers meeting on a weekly basis to advance the technology, right? Which is not very common. Lawyers would come at some other stage because it's fundamental to the way businesses and organizations are thinking about doing it right. So that also gives us some confidence that because we see it across the board that it's not just a rush to the top only. There is a lot of caution and care that is being incorporated. This is also coming out to some extent in the open communities. For example, we recently launched, together with many other organizations, something called the AI Alliance, which is an open alliance of interested organizations at hardware, software, all kinds of parts of the sector, coming together to think about what are these common tools, what are the common best practices, what are education programs that we need to do, so that as a global community, we are thinking about the holistic shift that we're going through and coming up with solutions. So,
thank you, Amit.
Few thoughts.
Ravi, you represent Krutrim, where you create models, but more pertinently, Krutrim is the first AI unicorn to be created in India. What really worked for you?
I think the jury is out. We have to create, and valuation is one indicator of possible success, not success itself. I think what is unique about the approach that we are taking to AI is its India-centricity. We want to fundamentally solve how to make AI very, very accessible to almost all Indians by working on various elements, right? One, the models itself, whether these are contextual to India, whether they separate, deal with languages very inherently. And the other is how do we think about bringing the cost structure down from through the stack, right? So if you look at the stack, it is the foundational models, it is the cloud infrastructure, and the silicon that powers the cloud infrastructure. And long-term investments are required across all of these so that at the end of it, we can provide a service to consumers or enterprises, which is very easy to afford, right? And that makes a big difference because then the penetration of such powerful technologies, pervade more, and the productivity gains that you were mentioning about actually materialize in a country like India as well. And we have seen this. It is particularly true in India, where the moment the mobile pricing went down, the penetration happened, like a hockey stick. And we are hoping to change that. So the vision is more expansive. It's not just one layer, but the entire stack. And the second is we are making a lot of rapid progress in this. We trained our first foundational model and put it out there. We put a product, we productized it in the form of a personal assistant which can be used by people in different languages, and put it out there at least in a beta phase very early on. So these things are also adding up to the perception that we'll be able to execute. Ola overall as a group, we are part of the, the Ola family of, let's say, businesses, and uh, we are, we have done it thrice. This will be the third time, sorry. In the ride-hailing business, in the electric vehicle business, this is the third one. So there is belief that we'll execute. So that's probably all of that adds up to the valuations and so on.
Absolutely. Ankur, I can't see you. Yeah. So, very interesting that after IIT Delhi, you joined McKinsey, but then you left and you were the team, part of the team that set up the Public Health Foundation of India. Very different worlds. And then you got back to McKinsey and you have spent what, more than 10 years implementing AI at various companies in renewables, steel making, chemicals, and media. In your work, how real or how large scale is the disruption as of now? And you used a term in our conversation called coal face. I didn't understand it very well, but you said it is where the rubber meets the road. Where is the rubber meeting the road when it comes to AI disruption?
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here. It's an honor. I remember buying my first business standard as a student when I saved enough. I am honored that you all thought I could be on this August panel.
How nice. Thank you.
I think the impact where the rubber is hitting the road is very varied in on the ground. And maybe instead of some big numbers, I might narrate two anecdotes to bring that to life. Yeah, I'm going to start with one which many of us may not be as used to, which is steel making and the blast furnace. Okay, this is where essentially there's a very experienced metallurgical engineer who goes to this big structure, looks like a big sphere, almost out of like an alien movie, and is adjusting the flow of gas, the flow of raw materials, the temperatures, and this is where the magic is sort of peering through a glass window to see is it the right orange, yellow, green to get the maximum steel out of that batch. Yeah. Now these experts in their domain are amongst the most prized employees of steel companies because that one individual perhaps has the maximum impact on the productivity of a steel plant. And as you can imagine, there aren't, it's not so easy to train someone to do this, right? And now if you're a large steel company with many such blast furnaces that you operate, you say, what can I do with AI in this space? We had an opportunity to partner with a very respected steel company, and we worked with this magician wizard of the blast furnace to train a model. And the model basically learned how the different speeds of gas flow and temperature changes and that right color through the window correlated with the quality of steel that was made. Okay. Now, initially, this expert wizard was a bit concerned about what's going to happen to that individual's job. But I think what the company did very well is to say, we have a few hundred people like this. You are the best, but the average is far below. And if we create this model, the average comes close to like 80–90% of where you are, not 50% of where you are. I think that's one type of impact where under the right guidance or as the right assistant to employees, the overall productivity of any operation can improve. I'm sitting amongst journalists and I should be very careful what I say, but maybe you could save a few hours after you do your research to put down the story that reduces the time from your research or your sort of penning down the first few words to the print, right? There are many ways in which it can be your superpower and raise the level of productivity across the organization, right? But on the other end, and this is very relevant for India as well, is a large number of people doing work which requires, I would say, lower level of skill. These are people making phone calls at call centers or doing data tagging work. I think there the impact could be as extreme as not just substitution, but substitution with far better results. And I think as a society, we have to acknowledge both sides of this. And I think it will require different actions. for us to think about raising the average in certain level of expertise-based professions, and thinking hard about what happens where someone sitting in Colorado can come up with an agent that makes better calls than perhaps 100,000 people sitting here, right? So yes, I hope that answers.
Thank you, Ankur. Professor Ravindran. So, IIT Madras has been doing phenomenal work in the area of AI. In fact, I was talking to Ravi this morning, and he was also talking about all kinds of things that are coming out of your institute. And personally, you feel very strongly about AI's role in education. We will come to that, but before that, is there something that marks IIT Madras apart from the other institutes? How is it that you are able to stand out in this area? Have you done something different?
Okay, I'm happy that you said that, but so one of the things that IIT Madras has been doing for the almost for the last 8 years or so is taking a very interdisciplinary approach towards doing AI research, right? So not saying that it is something which the computer science people do, or the algorithmic people are doing this, or the statisticians are doing this. So we have been always having a much more inclusive approach and developing both the AI talent and the research that's happening in IIT Madras. So that's certainly one thing that sets us apart. And it's not something that others can't do, right? So the other IITs and other organizations are catching up. I'm happy, right? And I don't think one IIT Madras is enough for India. So we need hundreds of these, right? So then I'm happy that more and more people are picking this up. And I hope to see we'll having this impact across the country, not just from IITM.
Well, great. Let's talk a little about education. In fact, education is an area that was a theme in my discussions in my pre-panel discussions with every panelist here. But Professor Ravindran, you told me not to talk about it, but it's irresistible because it connects with my state of Bihar. You said, can AI learn swear words in Mathili?
Yep.
Okay, I would like to know the answer. But we have to talk about AI's role in education, skills, healthcare. But let's begin with education because, all of us know for a fact that the quality of education, especially at the starting levels in India, leaves much to be desired. You mentioned that, teachers sometimes turn up at a school only to collect their salary and the rest of it. How can AI fix some of these gaps in education?
So this goes back to the blast furnace example we just heard, right? So we are worried about AI replacing a lot of workers, right? A lot of jobs, right? But in reality, in many key sectors in India, we don't have enough workers. We don't have enough talented workers. We don't have enough teachers. We don't have enough medical professionals, right? And what is AI going to do is provide you with the tools, right? So that it's happening in reality now. In many rural schools, if you go to, there is a single teacher who teaches like standards 8 through 12. Right? In fact, all subjects. Right? So that's the reality in the ground now, right? So now maybe still the same one person is going to continue teaching them, but he can do a much better job if you give access to AI tools for that person. Right? So it's not that we are going to get suddenly a lot of people migrating to the rural settings to start teaching, but the people who are already there, who are dedicated to doing this, can do a better job if we can train them and give them the right tools. And AI can certainly do that. Because there are a lot of issues that we need to solve. I mean, I know you wanted a discussion, so can I pick up on some of the points that others have already mentioned?
Of course, you must.
Sure. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to talk about is what Ravi said earlier, right? So the price point. Right now, the current levels at which these really capable AI systems operate, we cannot have penetration in India. It's too expensive. It's too expensive. I've been hearing stories about companies which started using AI for doing their customer service support and then have rolled back because it was far cheaper by 2 orders of magnitude to use humans to the customer support than using the latest AI systems, because per query you are paying, per interaction with the customer you are paying so much. Right? So certainly we are not at a point where AI penetration is sustainable in India. Right? So we can talk about what's going to happen in the future, so 2047, sure, but we have a lot of things that we need to solve before we get there. Right? And second, going back to your Maithili point, right? So that was not in the sense of can AI learn swear words in Maithili? Of course it can, right? The question is, do you recognize what a swear word is in Maithili as a developer sitting in Bangalore to make sure your AI doesn't use it? Right? We don't. That's the truth, right? So, so in the US, when we talk about responsibility, fairness, and ethics and stuff like that, you have, it's more or less black and white. It's a racial question, right? So in India, there's a lot more nuances to it, right? So, and we don't even have the resources to even know what kind of systematized bias is there in India. So that's where I was pointing out to the Maithili question, right? We don't know what are the swear words in Maithili. We don't have a dictionary of that.
Right. Interesting, but talking about the cost of implementing AI at various levels, isn't AI also far more efficient than human beings at some of the functions? Can't bots do it better in terms of language, grammar, stock responses, etc.? Irina?
Yeah, sure. And I'll kind of balance it out to what Professor Ravindran was saying to the question that you're asking. Yes, there will be a cost associated with it, but however, what is it that you're looking at equating? When do you kind of take a plunge in it? When is it a viable model? And when is it going to scale? Because if 2023 was the year of AI, 2024 is the year of AI at scale, right? Now, when you're looking at this, I'll give you a few examples in this context, and a lot of them in Indian context, because we are solving a lot of large-scale, population-scale problems, right? You asked a question about a bot asking a question in Maithili, right? Forget the swear word. I mean, a student who's kind of wanting to know what is the scheme and the educational thing that I'll get in my state, he or she asks it in a bot called Jugalbandi now, which is an app available on, say, WhatsApp itself.
Bot called what?
Jugalbandi.
Jugalbandi.
Which we worked across with the government of India. And in that, you can ask a query, a farmer, anybody, a citizen, can ask a query in a language of his or her choice. Bot goes across to the large language model, fetches the data. It's a speech to text, text to speech, and it comes back in Maithili or any other language. And it not just goes through the passing the data which is available for that particular repository, it goes for everything which is available in the country because the entire data has been fed, right? So one is that. Now, how do you create these data sets? Because that's a bigger problem to be solved. Because when you look at the nuances of a healthcare is different from agriculture. In agriculture, the language spoken in Bihar is different from what is getting spoken in UP. For this, you need data sets to be created. So there is another organization called Karya. Karya, like it's known to be the dignity of labor, right? So what they're doing is they're collecting data sets from various places, building these data models so that the data sets through which is feeding the information to the data models so that they can come out. Why am I saying these? By doing all these things, the cost efficacy from the large language model, now you can have small language models, which can, with the same level of efficiency and accuracy, be able to give you the responses, and that will bring the cost down. So when you look at anything from a banking or a manufacturing segment or any other of these corporate houses, things which go into it is A, productivity, B, efficiency, third is customer related, any kind of innovation growth and what they're gaining from that growth. And fourth, any level of product innovation. Now in all these spaces, customer service, if you are able to reduce the cycle time and bring it down by say 80%, if you're able to increase the efficiency accuracy by a 30%, that is where it's kind of making a difference. One of the examples is actually Air India. A lot of you here would have kind of traveled on it.
Yes.
They use the bot called the Maharaja bot. Ever since they kind of did it, about a couple of months back, they had answered more than 500 million queries, brought down the accuracy, answering 80% of that as an accurate, only the remaining ones going to an agent, going through 1,500 domains and giving efficiencies in a much quicker manner.
How interesting. Ankur, in your work with companies, did you see cost and efficacy and efficiency coming up as issues?
So, I think right now I can't think of a single sector which doesn't have meaningful opportunities to use AI in a way that's net positive in terms of the deployment.
Okay.
At the same time, I acknowledge I'm talking about my personal exposure set is companies above a certain size of a few thousand crores of revenue, right? And I can imagine that the size of the company is an important variable in this. And on the same sector, as you move towards the let's say the smaller side of the sizes, these things become a problem, right? So therefore, if we are thinking about it from a competitiveness, not just for the largest players, but you want to ensure that the smaller players are smaller only in terms of revenue today, stay competitive, then cost has to be solved for. I think that becomes important. But I would say in some sectors, it's actually more than a cost benefit analysis. Today, it is also sort of almost existential or strategic for many sectors to adopt, because their fundamental business model gets changed, right? If you're doing something where for 80% of your cost, there's a 30-40% productivity improvement, essentially people who will move fast will have significant advantage in that sector. So yes, I think that's how I would sum it.
Professor.
So I completely agree with what you said right now. So one of the things that we really have to think about, AI did not start in December 2022, right? So so there are a lot of AI tools that can be integrated into many. For example, logistics is a industry that had been disrupted even before Gen AI came to the field because of AI, right? So there are, of course, you would know much better than anyone else on the dais about how much that's important, right? So there are, we have to figure out, not just go with the Gen AI hype, but also figure out what AI technology really is going to cause the disruption in your industry, and then we can worry about this right size for the company that we're talking about.
Yeah, I would like to get back to the subject of education for just a little more, and please, all of you, please feel free to jump in. Is our current system of education still valid, relevant? Does it need to change? And if yes, then how? Amit, would you like to jump in from the research perspective? What needs to change?
Yeah, I'll take an example of some of my nephews and nieces, right? Because I think that's indicative. Some of them graduating from class 12 are so empowered to self-learn today that they're asking, what do I get by spending 4 years of my career in college? Because I'm going to be forced to learn things and use my time for that, whereas I could self-learn, become productive, start earning, do everything today, because you have MOOCs, you have these online courses, you have tutorials, especially if you look at IT sector, AI, cloud, all of this, there's a lot of material out there and enablement. So definitely there is something changing in the way people learn, people coming out of high school now. And I think we need to figure out as a society, how do we leverage all of that as part of our higher learning. That's definitely one area. The other thing is that I think AI is definitely a technology trend, but there's a bigger trend here. I'm sure we all can feel it, is the pace of innovation in society today is getting faster and faster. And today it's AI, tomorrow it'll be some maybe AGI, or it'll be quantum or something else, right? And I am not sure if we are set up to train our future generation in a way to be effective learners and be able to reskill and to be skilled in doing things like decision making and system design. Some of these higher order skills are becoming more and more important in society, because you can learn one particular skill. Okay, I know how to use this particular software, but that's going to become invalid in 2 years, right? So you need to be empowered to be able to make those choices yourselves and to be navigate through changing technology and business landscape. So I think some of these abstract level skills are very important for us to incorporate in our education.
Given how things stand now, if you were passing out of, say, 12th grade right now, would you go in for an IIT, or would you like to do it differently? Sorry?
Now, since you didn't mention a name and you are looking at me directly,
Sure.
so I'll pick it up. So, yeah, so I completely agree with Amit. In fact, we were talking about this just before we started the panel as well, right? So, education is in a flux, right? And it is not just AI, right? It's this availability of material that's online. It's internet,
Absolutely.
right? It's the World Wide Web that's disrupting education a lot more right now than AI itself, right? The availability of very, very high quality material produced anywhere in the world, right? So, I mean, if you ask somebody, hey, would you like to, look at classes from somebody who's putting things out from MIT, or would you like to go to, an NIT here, right? So, what would you prefer? Right? So
Right.
that's a hard question to answer, right? So we have to really rethink about what education means, right? So if I start teaching first-year kids, and many of them seem to already know all the topics that we have in the syllabus for first year, just because they watch all videos and other things during their vacation break or whatever, and then they come there prepared, ready to question you before we question them, right? So that's the kind of situation we are in right now. So we have to really relook and be more agile about what we teach the kids. So one of the things that IIT Madras has done, right? So we actually have this online four-year bachelor's program on teaching data science and applications to kids, right? So they don't even have to come to campus. It's a much more structured way of learning online, right? And this is open to much larger group of people. I think there are some 20,000 plus students already enrolled in different versions of the program right now. Yeah, it's pretty impactful. So we have to start thinking about different ways of structuring curriculum and teaching it to the kids, right? So, and in some sense, it doesn't have to be an either or choice.
Okay, Ankur?
I think to me, when I think about education, and that's quite close to my heart, you mentioned I had gone to the Public Health Foundation of India. I went there because they were going to open up educational institutes for public health professionals in India. And I thought, okay, at least in some way I can be close to the education world. And I still think a lot. I'm actually quite excited. I know there's all of this dilemma about what will people who are graduating sort of find, how will they be effective, right? Because a lot of jobs at scale, whether it was software development or some of the other processes that often people do out of engineering, are changing in a big way. And we haven't even understood the extent of change there. But my favorite is, there was this telecom ad long back where kids in a remote village are able to talk to a teacher on a phone. And this was an idea about how access to education could change.
What an idea, Sergi. Yeah, that was the idea.
Yeah. And I think now, if I think about the cell phone penetration, can we imagine a world where a kid in every nook and corner of the country actually has a teacher in the form of a AI bot who can actually engage, coach in a very personalized manner? The ideal of the first world education of sort of personalized coaching in a small setup, a lot more interactive, Montessori style, could it not be made available to every single individual? And if we put our might behind it, could it not be done in a way that India can afford it in the near future? It's not a far-off dream. And I think that unlock can then be extended to healthcare professionals. It can be extended to farmers. It can be extended very widely. And I think that part of education, in terms of the opportunities it opens up, I'm most excited about. I think that, yes, there are all of these unknowns we don't know today, but I also have a lot of faith in sort of us as a community figuring it out and showing the way to the world.
But to what extent can technology replicate or replace human interface? What we see in real life is that once the pandemic has receded, EdTech is not doing great because people want to get back to classrooms. So if we are talking about this kind of a teaching method, how realistic is that, Irina?
Sure. So I think I'll just build on top of what Ankur said. And while for a lot of us here in the privileged world, the content is a differentiator, the teacher is a differentiator. What we are talking about in India, in a 1.4 billion population, the last mile access and how do we kind of make it go across there is so critical. We all know government schools the level of education and their strength in terms of the difficult complex subjects is very low. So how do we ensure that we are speaking to the students in a, I use the word hyper-personalized manner, so that we are speaking in a manner that they understand and it piques their curiosity to learn. And that is what happens when you are able to equip the teacher to create lesson plans which are modularized and tailored for individuals instead of classes and masses. So there's a Shikshana Foundation with whom we created the Shiksha Copilot, now which is working along with teachers in government schools and who are kind of going and serving across in villages. Neither do they have the time nor the right set of assets to kind of create it, but with these kinds of what you called a co-pilot, if I may, they are able to literally tailor things which go across in that realm, right? And in our philosophy, what we think is that all of us here need a co-pilot, right? I mean, when I wake up in the morning, I'd really like somebody to nudge me and tell me that these are the 2-3 things you might want to do and you might not want to do. And if you're doing well in certain areas, how can you have an effective coach? So having a co-pilot, whether you're a doctor and kind of telling you doing the, taking away the entire doctor-patient fatigue via that, whether you're a farmer, telling you buy geospatial images, this is the right time to sow your crop, right? So these are the co-pilot realities which exist even as of now, and I think the possibilities are immense.
Disclosure that Copilot is a Microsoft product. I don't know how far IBM will agree with it.
I would say Copilot is a philosophy more than a product.
Ravi, how about your models? And you're also greatly interested in talent management. How effective can your models be in this area?
In education, you mean? Yes. So we are seeing very interesting use case in the beta product that we put out. And some of these use cases are very unexpected. Some were expected, of course. You know, obvious, the expected ones were people in colleges are writing essays and blogs and, you know, doing their project assignments using the product. So that's what was expected. But if you look at the way teachers in tier 2 towns, tier 3 towns, they're using the product is phenomenal. They are, like Irina was mentioning, they are using it to create questionnaires, lesson plans, many Indic language use cases also. So for example, content is available. You have Wikipedia, you don't go to the library anymore, right? But it's in a form which is not easily understood by the teacher, let alone the students. And that barrier goes away if you have the benefit of AI tools which are inherently understanding of your language and context. So those things we are seeing are very interesting. And I think that is the entire purpose of our endeavor in any case, that ultimately the penetration of such tools and technology should be at the last, to the last mile at the grassroots, right? These are some examples that we are seeing which are phenomenal.
Thanks, Ravi. Shall we talk about safety in AI development? About a year or so ago, some 40 CEOs of the global tech industry had written an open letter saying, let's have a 6-month moratorium on AI development. One of them was Elon Musk. He's not known to be a man of caution. He's more adventurous. He does funny things on talk shows. But how real is that threat? Do we really need to have a far more calibrated approach? Is a moratorium something we need? How do we really keep this under control and prevent it from becoming one of those movies in which a robot tries to kill everyone? Amit?
Yeah, so I mean, clearly moratorium is not a practical solution because the immense interest in the wave of AI globally is going to move forward. I think a lot of the innovation that has happened is in the core AI technology, how to use GPUs to train these things. But we need a lot of innovation in this area of understanding, controlling, governing it. And I think that hasn't had the attention that it needs. So it's not going to get solved by stopping things. It's going to be solved by also innovating in these areas. It may not always be technological innovations. It will be to some extent to allow that visibility and control of the data processes and everything. But it needs methods and best practices and regulations, but also a shared understanding and a shared agreement of standards in the industry of how are we going to do different things. I think because the scope and impact of AI is so wide across so many sectors, it offers also a unique challenge and a unique opportunity for industry-wide standards and agreements of what we are going to do and what we are not going to do, right? And so it does need new ways of thinking. It cannot just be somebody else is going to come up with that answer, right? A government is going to come up with that answer. No, they'll come up with some answers, but not all of the answers. Or some company, you know, Microsoft and IBM is going to come up with a tool that is going to solve all of my governance problems. We may want to, but the reality is it needs a community approach to set some of these standards, and I think that's going to be an important part of establishing this trust.
Professor Ravindran, safety?
So this is something that we think a lot about, right? So both in academia and of course in the industry. And at IIT Madras, we've started this Center for Responsible AI, where for the first time, like Amit, I talk to lawyers. I talk to lawyers. I talk to policy makers, right? So we have actually created this organization where people who think about not just the technology, but the impact of technology on society and how it is going to challenge the existing regulatory landscape and things like that. So all kind of stakeholders can come to a single platform and start talking about it. So stepping back, I don't think a moratorium is the right answer. First, like Amit said, you can't enforce it. I mean, you can possibly stop doing it personally, but apart from that, you cannot really guarantee that others will not explore this area. The second thing, when we talk about regulation, like AI is really cross-cutting. So we have to worry about safety, but what safety means is going to differ depending on what application you're going to use the AI for, right? So, I mean, so for something like the BFSI sector is already heavily regulated, right? So there you have to figure out, hey, how am I going to build AI systems that can, stick within the boundaries specified by the existing regulations, and in what way would they challenge those regulations, right? There are some things that I can do which are quote unquote not desired behavior, but still permitted under the existing regulatory framework. This kind of understanding we don't have yet, right? So that's something that we really need to do. Before we start thinking about Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? So there are a bunch of things that, even AI that is right now out there in daily use, that where we have to start thinking about guardrails, right? So I think this quote unquote fear mongering that you see being indulged by some of the people who get the popular press time, right, is actually taking attention away from the real safety work that needs to be done. Right? But yeah, it's both academia, industry, government, everybody has to play a role. And I'm actually surprised, because I think Microsoft and IBM have taken the lead in building these tools already, right? More so than the other big players in this market. So I'm surprised you said that we are not doing enough.
What I meant is we are doing that, but that alone will not solve the entire problem, right? So it does need the communities of all the right stakeholders to come together and make certain decisions, right? Tools will exist, but unless decision makers agree on certain decisions of how to use the tools, they will just be tools.
Yeah, I'll just add to what Professor Ravindran was saying. See, AI is not something which is coming right now. So there were the principles of AI, and we had 6 of these principles, which was hinged around fairness, accountability, reliability, inclusivity, etc. Right? Now, what has happened from then till now in the advent of Gen AI? I think the 2 questions which come in everybody's mind: do we know enough? The answer to that is no. Should we then wait to get to know and then start? The answer to that would also be no, right? But do we know enough to ensure that we have guardrails? The answer to that is yes. So what we've evolved overall is that in the overall way that we are kind of putting things together, we've put across a blueprint for AI. Now that is across with the governments and the laws of the land. So when we know enough, what we've done is we've created this entire blueprint with a few tenets. The first one is towards saying that we create it along with the regulator and the government of the country. The second is towards saying that whatever goes into that blueprint, it is shared very transparently with academia, with the industry, and everybody to be participative. The third is towards saying that as and when you see certain things kind of not being aligned to this, we have effective guardrails which can be brought in. Then we say that yes, there should be an effective industry academia parlance which can be brought in from a participation standpoint. So these are the ways these blueprints get created. They're tenets that we have evolved, and those are the things that we are putting across right in our engineering, working across with the government to see that whatever evolves, how do we kind of co-create and build things collectively, and that's the way that we are being very responsible about it.
Interesting. Any other views? Ankur, Ravi?
I'll probably add one from practical experience. So when we put the beta product out, the first couple of days or 3 days were one of attack, right? Because the moment you put a machine in front of a human, the first instinct is, let's break this, right? And it was a revelation because we thought that we have thought about everything. But the amount of fault lines that exist in our country, right, are tremendous, are just multi-dimensional. So you try to please one person, the other person will be offended and so forth. So the way we think about safety, neutrality, bias is very, very contextual to where we are, right? And that's a very complex problem to solve, as we are learning every day. That it requires a lot of research, I'm sure, and novel approaches. Because like Irina was mentioning, that we know there is a problem and we don't know the solution completely yet. And in that gap, we have to put in a lot of work because AI, you know, at a very abstracted level has a mind of its own, and you don't know what is being generated, right? So moderation of these things is a very complex problem. And I think we should put enough energy, resources, research especially to, you know, solve this problem.
Okay. Ankur, did you want to add?
Yeah, I think about AI, a lot of things that I would have wanted to say is covered. It's a multifaceted problem. There are no straightforward answers. We have to stay agile as a society. But I would say there are examples of recent technologies that could give us cues on some of the fronts. When blockchain came out, it was a hobby project for some people in decentralized finance, also driven by some fairly lofty ideals and ideas. And then, you know, today there are ETFs around it. It is coming into the formal economy. At the same time, it is considered one of the channels by which money laundering is happening. And I think the system is both figuring out the safe way to use it, but also curbing sort of ways in which society as a whole may not want it to be used. And I think similar agility and innovation going hand in hand is likely an option for AI rather than a 6-month moratorium or something like that.
Okay. So all of you directly or indirectly are involved with companies. And while we can talk about, you know, governance and society, et cetera, can we talk about what is it that companies need to do differently? Is there something that they need to do differently? And if yes, what is that? The way things are going, and does it need to change?
Yeah, I think I'll kind of say that while we might not know it all, because the space is evolving and collectively we are getting to know what's there in it for the future, but always the intent is to work with a lot of foresight, accountability, and responsibility to work with the entire ecosystem. I think Ravi or Ankur were pointing to the entire stack which goes into it, right? So you have to look left, right, above, and beneath to see that who are the players who are working along with you in that entire ecosystem space, and you're working very collectively in that entire ecosystem, whether these are startups, whether these are applications which are getting created. The tenets of AI as you're seeing it being built responsibly, are getting infused in each and every layer. And these practices, we've kind of created these 16 tenets, and these 16 tenets we are sharing across with the larger ecosystem, taking the learnings from there. Say, for example, in our in the large language models, etc., that we have, there are more than 1,600 participants which are there, taking learnings from them, infusing this, and then in a very agile manner, working on that and ensuring that whatever you're kind of generating out of that, that's happening in a very responsible manner.
Thanks.
Yeah, I agree with Irina, right? Looking at your ecosystem, but I think there's one thing that is fundamentally different that companies have an opportunity to is to actually create communities beyond your direct sphere of influence. You may not be directly working with somebody as part of your business ecosystem, but being able to create those forums and communities that enable sharing of learning, right? So if Ola figures out, hey, these are certain best practices of managing bias, some of that should ideally have a space where it's shared with others so that everyone is not taking the same amount of time to figure out the best way to do safe AI. And I think this is not something that has been done a lot in technology in the past. And that's an opportunity that companies have this time around.
Very similar point, which is just because the nature of this AI versus all the AI that has existed, it's very different. We need to be very, all companies, like speaking on behalf of company, we need to be very collaborative with all parts of the ecosystem, right? The legal, the government, research, technology. Without which it won't be, will not be responsible enough, right? So it's not no company can claim that we can solve this, right? It is a complex problem, multi-dimensional problem. I think we need to collaborate to make it harmless and productive at the same time.
So I think a lot's been said about our ecosystem and collaboration, and I could see the business standard as like the credible voice for where the industry is going, for example. But I think for an individual organization, the three things we see as good first steps. Number one is building awareness, especially amongst the senior leadership. Often I find people in the senior leadership use the same words but mean different things. So can we have a common understanding, because you are probably going to talk about this in the boardroom, and it's useful if you can all have that common language. The second is a bit of a strategic thought on saying, what could this mean for us, relaxing what is available today versus what could be tomorrow, right? And therefore, what could it mean to you as a publication house, as an educational institution, as an innovator, as a producer of technology? What could it mean to you as a consulting service? And I think we ask ourselves this question. I think every senior executive group is doing that. I think the third, which I would say is pilots with an eye to scale. Often pilots get started because someone's enthusiastic about something, and it's a good thing, but is that something that you would scale? You already have 20 other priorities. This is one of maybe 5, 10 that may be a big priority for you, may not be. But then if you're going to pilot, engage on things that you might want to scale with that strategic view. So 3 just actionable near-term things for leaders.
Yeah, so I wasn't sure whether I was supposed to talk or not, but then I decided, since I anyway supply talent to the industry, so I can. Sure. I completely echo what Ravi was saying earlier, right? So the big companies are already doing that. So they have people, who are HCI experts, they have economists, they have sociologists on their roles, right? But then people do not think about that in general, right? Where you're developing solutions for a particular sector, you are more focused in developing the skills there and having teams look like that. But AI, as a technology, is also going to have social costs, right? So this is something that I was reading up recently on, how the ability to create very realistic content is going to change the way how we react with online media. Right? That's going to be significant social cost. Every piece of information you see online now has to be verified. There's a cost to each and every one of us now to go and consume information on the internet, right? So when you're building these AI products, you're not just building the solution, you're also going to have unintended consequences of how the society behaves. So you really need to take a more holistic view and actually have a much more inclusive team that's helping you look at not just the technology itself, but also the impact of the technology. That's something the companies should do different. And going back to what Amit was saying earlier, the company should collaborate in terms of setting standards. And if the companies don't do it by themselves, the government will force you to do it. That's going to come. So, yeah.
Since your mic is still on,
Sorry, I switched it off, but I turned it on again.
No, please switch it back on. I would like to ask each of you that as of today, if there had to be a call to action, what will that be? Starting with you, Professor. What should be a call to action on
So
AI?
the call to action would be both from an education point of view and also looking at the impact online, right? So is to make sure that a larger and larger fraction of the population has a better understanding of the role of AI and the impact of AI, right? Not just the false promises, but the true potential and also the caveats, right? And we need to do this across sectors. It's starting from our civil services people, right? So starting, maybe our parliamentarians, right? And every sector, doctors, lawyers. So we need to make sure that people understand what's going to be the impact of this technology, because it's a revolutionary technology. It is going to change every aspect, just like computers have changed how we do every piece of, in our recent memory, right? So none of us have really experienced the Industrial Revolution, but we have experienced what computing did to us,
Yes.
and we are going to see something of the same scale, or even larger, right? So
Do you
we need to
think,
have that awareness built.
Do you think governments, center and state, can become better if they used AI more?
Of course.
Okay.
You wanted
Ankur?
me to expand on
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, that's why I paused.
No, but I'll let others talk more. Yes, yeah.
Okay, Ankur, call to action.
Whom am I calling upon? Okay.
World at large.
Let's say as India. Yeah,
Okay.
as India. I would urge us to think about a few areas of social impact that are at scale and critical for India. Let's say education, we talked about, maybe healthcare, maybe the economies outside tier 1, 2, 3, 4 cities, and say, how do we set up those accelerators, those labs, the infrastructure, the talent supply, to make a real dent in those problems? And so those accelerators, which will require all of us to participate, is my call to action.
Thank you. Ravi?
A tough question, but I'd say that as a country, we cannot be a developed country on borrowed technology. So I think the main call to action is invest in deep tech and invest heavily, because the creators of the tool need to come from within. Else we'll suffer the same plight. China has been very good, right, at this. But still they're suffering because, at least in the interim, that, the semiconductor ban and the chip ban, the US Chips Act, etc. All of these efforts are to stymie a growing country, right? It can come to us, right? So we need to, I think the biggest call to action, which I see when we do talent hunt, we want to get the best researchers in, right, from large companies like IBM and Microsoft. It's difficult, right? Especially if the people are overseas, that we need to develop a very thriving research and deep tech ecosystem here. That's the imminent call to action, right?
Thank you. Amit?
So I think, especially for India, given the diversity we have, cultural, economic, social, so much, and the aspirations we have of growth and success as a nation, probably more than any other country, we have an opportunity to leverage AI for the benefit of our nation than any other country. I think the call to action would be to get into a mission mode around that. right? Maybe it's at the government level or, somewhere. Because I feel we're still at the level of let startups thrive, let companies figure it out, sort of more business as
Right.
usual India growth story. But I think with AI, we have an opportunity to have a mission mode around bringing public services that use it, enabling ecosystems, things like that. That would be a call to action.
Thank you. Irina?
Since the nation impact part has been covered up, I'll kind of talk about one, which is how am I AI ready in this era of AI? So towards that, I think there's a creator which lies within each one of us. Possibly we just do not have the time to ignite it. So if we are having a higher levels of productivity, saving say that 15 minutes a day or a few hours a week, then can that be fuel towards igniting the creativity on one side? So can we have such a co-pilot for ourselves? And also, can we be co-pilots for all the industries, whether it's agriculture, healthcare, banking, etc., on any side that they're working on interacting with us? How can those co-pilots be created with the highest levels of empathy so that we are able to kind of interact for a better world?
How nice. We are drawing to a close of the session. Any thoughts that remain unspoken, unarticulated? Anything else you would like to add?
I can just add that I think
Sure.
a lot of times people ask the question that, is it something that we need to jump on now? Should we wait and watch?
Yes.
From what we are hearing from all our customers and the industry, the time is absolutely now. How you do it, in what manner, is a decision to make, but the plunge and the readiness to go in for it should definitely be there.
Thank you. Professor?
Yeah. So I have actually seen one cycle of AI and bust. Right?
When
So
was
back
that?
in the 90s. I mean, when I started my PhD, AI was really hot, and then it went into a downswing, and then now it's hot again. Right? So when I started teaching, there will be like 5 students in my AI classes. I kid you not, right? This is 20 years ago. And now people can't get into the room, right? So I truly believe that this time around, right? So we have something different, right? So AI is going to make a difference, partly because you just pull your phone out, right? There are at least like 15 apps in your phone that use AI inherently, right? Because AI has now come to your hands, right? It is not something that is esoteric. And there's no question, I mean, now, right? It is now, right? But we need to get in, but we need to go in with our eyes open, right? Not get oversold on the hype, because every time AI dies and then comes again, it's the hype that kills it, right? Not that the technology itself is not capable even back then. I think we just have to go in with our eyes open, but now is the time.
Thank you. With that, we come to a close. I must thank all the panelists for taking time out and agreeing to join our panel. I think all of you flew into Delhi this morning from some city or the other. We really, really appreciate this, and we hope to continue this association in the weeks and years to come. Thank you once again. I'll now hand it over to Gitika.
Thank you to you all. May I please request you all to come? May I please request you all to come together for a group photograph? Thank you to all our esteemed panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for them, and thank you to you for moderating this session. Please join the photograph.
Only for the panelists. You have to come in.